مرحبا معكم رياض حتى نحكي عن أجدد.
Hi, this is Jane. Today we're gonna. Hi, my name is Albert, and I'm going to talk about.
Hello everyone, this is Miljan from MediaCast.
Hey
Today
everyone,
I'm gonna show
my
you
name
guys.
is Ram. Welcome everyone.
Hello, everyone, once again, and welcome to MediaCast Virtual Summit 2020. And I am very excited to talk to you right now. And our topic for today is very relevant to our new normal. My name is Lawrence, or Larry, or whatever you want to call me again. I have a lot of names here, but it's not about me this time. So we are going to talk to one of the most important brands in our time right now, and I am talking about Blackmagic Design. And to join us from Blackmagic Design, we have Darren Gosney. He is our technical sales manager in Blackmagic Design, and he is based in Manchester. How are you, Darren?
I'm doing great, thank you, Larry. It's really nice to be here this morning. Obviously, we've not had the opportunity to come over for the CabSat Summit earlier in the year, and as you can see, I've missed my annual source of vitamin D. Very much looking forward to getting out to see you in person, but I'm really excited to be here today and talk to you around web broadcasting.
Yes, actually, we've been missing you guys. We haven't seen each other this year. Normally, we see each other like twice a year, but this year is pretty different. But guess what? We've been seeing each other a lot in webinars and spaces like this, and I think that's good enough for now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a strange year for us, but certainly having platforms like this and being able to reach each other through webinars, through Skype, through Zoom applications, for example, it's been really great to keep in touch with you throughout the year.
Yes, and we are, speaking of which, we're very, pumped up to really talk about web broadcasting this day. So, if you don't mind, I just want to jump right to the topic. So, I have a few questions for you. So, shall we start?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's dive into it.
All right. So, well, we've started talking about broadcasting, and it's basically a term that we keep on hearing these days. A lot of people are talking about web broadcasting. Everybody's doing their own web broadcasting, and more is happening every day. So, from your point of view and from Blackmagic's point of view, how do you guys define web broadcasting?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said there, the term web broadcasting is growing more and more. These days, we're hearing it all the time from different places, and it's kind of a lot of people will think that it's because obviously we're going through the global pandemic and everyone's shifting their workflows to online delivery of content now. But even looking back, if we go back to last year, and even in previous years before that, we were seeing a real surge in the number of kind of web videos and web content that was being pushed out online. So if I just pull up a quick slide there, it's a really interesting statistic that I pulled out from one of Cisco's studies from last year, and that was that 80% of all internet traffic in 2019 was actually video. That's a really interesting statistic because back 5 years previous to that, back in 2014, the same figure, so the same video content online was actually only 64% at that point in time. So we've seen a real rise in the amount of video content that's being pushed out just in a very short space of time over 5 years, and that's showing the popularity now of web broadcast. Now, the applications that we're seeing increase now and what we're seeing increase in popularity are things that didn't especially exist going back a few years. We're looking at things like web conferencing now. You've got a huge number of people pushing out content, pushing out video to web conferencing applications, just like we are now. You've got lots of people who are doing live product demonstrations or product announcements, and they're doing those online as well. So you think big corporate companies, big corporations who want to do a product launch, there's no point in just doing that product launch to a room full of 200 people in an auditorium when you can reach potentially thousands or even millions of people by recording that content or streaming that content live as it happens as well. Another example, you've got online training sessions. So Lawrence, you mentioned that we've been doing a lot of our online training, a lot of our reach out to distributors and to customers through online delivery now as well. And then another one you've got there, you've got esports, e-gaming. This has become hugely popular over the last few years, and we're seeing lots more content being pushed out from people who are gamers on games consoles, PC gaming, for example. And that's just a market that was never there going back 10, 15 years. So it's a huge surge in that market. And what we're now seeing as well is normal traditional broadcasts, so things like radio shows, for example. Even now, traditional radio broadcast, they're looking to diversify their offerings, and they want to push out content now and reach new markets, potentially add additional revenues to what they're doing. So rather than just having radio, for example, they might now have videos that they push out online as well. And I mean, that means they can bring in additional revenue through things like advertising, for example. And then the final thing on there is the special interest content. Now, this is really quite an exciting side for it, because this is everything else. This is your things like houses of worship pushing out content to their congregation. This is things like car shows, music shows, anything where someone's got kind of their own content they want to push out, and they've now got platforms to actually deliver that. And the platforms that we're talking about are all these popular platforms that everybody wants to use now. So the likes of YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, for example, and then potentially other platforms like Snapchat, LinkedIn, or Vimeo. But in terms of how we actually define it, that's obviously a huge, broad spectrum of different applications there. I think there's three core areas that we could actually define that as, and I like to think of it as web conferencing, webinars, and webcasting. And to define those specifically, what I would say is that web conferencing is kind of a one-to-one session like we're doing now, or an open forum where maybe there's a few of us on the call. And that's through applications like Skype that we are now, or through Zoom, for example. Then your webinars is potentially a one-to-many format. So me speaking, multiple people watching, multiple people listening, but the interaction doesn't come until the end when you have like a Q&A session, for example. And then webcasting essentially encompasses everything else. So that's your kind of that special interest content, that niche magazine style production quality, potentially with multiple inputs, nice graphics, and things like that. Again, things like the house of worship market, or sports, or kind of car or music shows and things like that. So I like to define it as those three. So web conferencing, webinars, and then webcasting encompassing everything else.
Yeah, that's so you're basically talking like there's a vast area to cover when you talk about web broadcasting. But there's another point, in that case. So okay, I know that there's live streaming aspect of producing content, and there's also like an on-demand side of it. Now, of course, we know like video on demand platforms, but even video on demand platforms, they also offer live streaming. So, as a consumer, or as someone who wants to produce contents for everyone, why would I go for live streaming and not on demand?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now, exactly as you mentioned there's an increasing demand to live stream content. We don't have that physical face-to-face interaction anymore. That's the first thing, because we are obviously in lockdown across various different countries, and we've got the global pandemic happening. Businesses are wanting to diversify how they now reach out to their customers. They don't want to lose that contact first and foremost. They still want to be able to reach them, and that's where things like the web conferencing side of things come in. But beyond that, there's a few other key reasons why people would want to specifically to live stream. The first thing is adding revenue potential to their productions. So if you diversify the productions that you're actually creating, it gives you the option to sell that content into different areas. You've got other key things as well, like that interaction that you've got with your audience during the live production. So the great thing with live content is, as you're producing things, if you're pushing that content out through something like YouTube or a Facebook or any platform that has the ability to have live chat or live Q&A sections, what that means is that the content can actually change on the fly, and you can diversify the content you're pushing out depending on what the audience reacts to. So if the audience wants to see more of one particular thing, then you can just keep producing more of that content, and you're not fixed in terms of set in what you're actually showing online. The other thing is it's a lot faster. So the ability to just switch between potentially multiple sources and push that content out immediately and have your audience absorb that immediately removes a whole heap of the back end work that you might have to do. So the requirements on any post-production, that's removed because you're doing everything live. You've also got things like, even if the content isn't actually going to be broadcast live, you might decide to shoot it as live to then push it out retrospectively. And just by switching things, putting in things through a switcher, for example, and doing everything live in terms of you cutting between the different cameras, this again massively reduces that post-production requirement that you have at the back end, and means you can very quickly make any tweaks before you throw that content online. But that difference between live and kind of pre-recorded content is crucial there, and adds a lot more into the scope of what you can do.
And I've also met some customers who are they're doing their live stream, but at the same time after that they repurpose that and then put it out there as an on-demand content.
Yeah, and the great thing about that is that you can push out one particular kind of edit in terms of what you've done live, but then you can totally rescale that. You can shorten it down. You can have kind of highlights packages or highlights reels, or just one particular segment you want to kind of cut out and push out as one particular bespoke piece for one particular topic. So yeah, it's a great way to do it, is do that production live, but then post-produce it and divide that up into the sections you want to push out as individual videos, for example.
I agree. And I think most of our viewers right now, they might be new to this concept of live production and live streaming. What are the common pitfalls or challenges that they might face while starting this thing about live broadcasting?
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to live production and live streaming, there are certainly a number of different challenges, a number of different problems that you've got to consider before you actually dive into it and start to try and get into live streaming. Listed a few of them that people should definitely look out for. First and foremost, we feel that the kit needs to be as easy to operate and reliable as possible. That kit, you should test that where possible. So if you can, set up the workflow prior to actually going live. And what I mean by that is a lot of applications these days have the ability to set up maybe a private stream that you can watch beforehand. In the sense of conferencing software like we're using today with the likes of Skype, you can test your camera outputs and you can test your microphone before you actually go live. So testing that equipment is key before you go online. The other thing to consider is that speed to air. So the thing with live production especially is that live events happen very quickly and they happen once. So the thing with that is you can't say you're filming a keynote speaker during a presentation, you can't run onto the stage if you missed the beginning of that presentation, you haven't pressed go live quick enough, you can't run onto the stage and ask that keynote speaker to start again because you've missed that. So the ability to get that equipment on air as quickly as possible is really key when it comes to web broadcasting. The kind of idea that I suggest to people is if you can have all of your kit pre-cabled and preset, then it makes this much simpler. So it might be having a piece of hardware which is everything in one box, for example, or it might be if you have multiple pieces of equipment, building them into a flight case so that you just have to plug in the power, for example, and then you can deploy it really quickly and get on air as quickly as you possibly can. I'd always suggest doing a pre-site visit just before the event. This enables you to test things like the internet connection, make sure you've got the speed that you need to upload the content, for example. And then there's other things as well. So you've got to be aware that live production is very high pressure. You do have that one chance to get it right. So again, this comes down to having the reliable kit. It's essential that you know how to use the kit as well, because once you kind of need to go live, that's something that needs to happen straight away. And then the last one I think is having original content. That's something that's really, really key. As we mentioned, there's huge amounts of video content out there right now. So if you're pushing out the same kind of content that the same person down the street is pushing out, then you're going to struggle to kind of rise to the top. So having original content and pushing out content regularly, say every week, this is key to success in live streaming and live broadcast.
Yeah, one of the things that you listed there, the high pressure. I think that's what the team right now is feeling, because there's only one way to get this right, and we have to get this right, or else everybody can see what we did wrong, right? So
absolutely, yeah. So I used to work in live sports. I used to work for Manchester United to do some of their football coverage as a studio camera operator. And the sense of fear and the sense of dread when you're working in live production, it's very real. And having that one chance to get it right is, it's scary, but it's so exciting. And that's why I really love live production.
Yeah, and it's also rewarding at the end of the day, at the end of the shoot, you're like, oh, finally. And then, it's really a fun feeling, really, inside.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, thank you for those for listing them down. And we started off with the challenges, but for someone again who wants to start his own live production or web broadcasting, what are the common components that he should be looking at?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's something that that I get asked all the time. Is what do I actually need to build a setup for live streaming? Now, there's obviously a huge number of components you could add in, but I like to break it down into four key areas, and I define those as such. So first of all, you have your video sources. Now, this includes things like your cameras, maybe media players, computer outputs, for example. And essentially, it's what you want your audience to be able to see, what you want them to actually have on their screen and appear in front of them. The second thing is your capture device or your interface. Now, this defines the piece of hardware that is used to connect that video source, that video you want the audience to see, connect that into your computer for live streaming. The third element, this is defined as the software layer or a hardware streaming engine. Now, this is where the video itself is actually encoded to a stream-friendly format. This can either be done in software using something like OBS, which I use quite a lot, or it can be done in a hardware encoder, so something like one of our ATEM Mini Pros, for example. And then the final piece is the streaming platform itself. So this is where the customer is actually going to view the content that's coming off the back end there. And I think it's worthwhile making this relevant to what we mentioned earlier, because we mentioned the three different areas of web broadcasting being web conferencing, webinars, and then finally webcasting being everything else. So I've kind of put together a few little schematics to show people exactly how they can quickly and easily set up, because I think visually it's really easy to see it from that point of view. So first and foremost, starting with web conferencing, just to show how simple and how quick it can be to set up. Web conferencing applications like Skype, for example, they will commonly utilize webcams for their video sources. So the way that this generally works is webcams have what's called a UVC or a USB video class chip. Now, this is a generic chip that's supported by a huge number of applications. And what it means is when you plug that webcam in, it's recognized by Skype, by Zoom straight away, and it's seen as a video source. But the problem you've got is when you're using webcams like that, often they'll be relatively lower quality. They might have a smaller sensor, which is less sensitive to light, and it kind of the quality isn't great. So what we'll find with customers is they'll quite often want to utilize things like DSLRs, camcorders, maybe one of our pocket cameras, for example, and bring that in to the Skype application. Now, the main problem you've got there is that these kinds of cameras, they don't have UVC chips in them. They have a HDMI output, or they might have an SDI output if it's a more professional camera, for example. But there's no way of plugging that directly into Skype. So this is where we utilize one of our devices that has a UVC chip in it. So in this case, I've listed the Blackmagic Web Presenter. And what that has is HDMI input in there, and it's got a UVC chip inside. So essentially, when you plug the pocket camera or a HDMI camcorder into the web presenter, it thinks, or Skype thinks, that you've plugged in a webcam. It doesn't realize that it's been tricked into thinking that the camcorder is a webcam, and immediately that's visible as a source. No drivers required, and you can just plug that in immediately and start working with a camera like that. Then we want to scale up potentially and go on to the next setup, which would be your webinars. We've just done web conferencing. There's webinars. With webinars, this is where we potentially have multiple sources. So you might add in extra cameras, and you might have laptops that you want to feed in kind of presentations like I'm doing now in this particular case. Having a switcher allows you to switch between multiple cameras, and the one that I'm using right now is an ATEM Mini Pro, which combines both switching and capture into the laptop. So I can take the laptop inputs, I can take my camera inputs, feed them through the ATEM Mini Pro, and then that has a UVC chip inside, so it's recognized to the conferencing application, again, as a webcam source for that. Then the final one is webcasting. So again, this is where we scale everything up, and the production can become really huge, and we can do whatever we want with that. So with webcasting, because it can range massively in terms of size, scale, you have a much larger number of inputs. You're going to need a larger switcher for that. Potentially, you're going to be working with broadcast cameras, with SDI connections, for example, or you could still be using HDMI camcorders as well. But this is the point where you need to bring in a switcher to allow you to switch between those multiple inputs. Add things in like graphics, for example, and have multiple MEs potentially to layer up those graphics. And when you do bring in that switcher, this is the point where you could potentially use either the web presenter, again, to capture it into those applications for Zoom or Skype, for example, because it's seen as a webcam style device. But alternatively, other people will want to use uncompressed capture devices like our Ultra Studios or our DET links to avoid any of the additional compression and bring those in.
Well, yeah, actually, that's kind of touched my next question, wherein HDMI may not always be the case for some production companies or some live broadcasting or webcasting companies. Sometimes they have SDI cameras, and you've mentioned a bit about Blackmagic Design's line of other switchers, I just want to hear from you. Some of us know this already, that there's a very good solution from Blackmagic Design for full SDI workflows, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So for those customers who are working with that broadcast equipment, with SDI equipment, and the benefits of that being you can work over much more significant distances. If you look at something like a HDMI cable run, typically you can get up to 10 meters, but with SDI you can run up to 100 meters. So if you're working in larger facilities, larger venues, again, could be, for example, a sports venue, it could be a house of worship, for example, and you've got cameras all around the venue, you need to be able to run those cables over more significant distances. And this is where something like an ATEM switcher comes into the mix. We have a range of switches that vary in size and scale. So starting from obviously the smaller HDMI-based switches that I'm using, but then if you jump into SDI-based switches, we have switches that with as many as 40 inputs if you go all the way up to the very top end that we have. So we do have a kind of a switcher to suit everybody's different needs. And I suppose the important thing there is how you then capture that into to your streaming application as well, because we mentioned using something like the web presenter for capturing using the UVC feature of that. But then when you want to capture uncompressed content, for example, and have more control over the stream, then you need to look at some of the other Blackmagic capture devices that we have. So we've got a huge range of switches, a huge range of capture devices to suit different demands. We've got internal PCIe-based capture cards that you can put into a computer system, and then external Thunderbolt devices such as the Ultra Studio. And there's a huge different range of connections. You can have SDI-based, HDMI, analog, for example. And it's crucial here that the customer picks you pick the best product to suit your needs. Again, the benefits of having a capture device like this is that you've got that full control over your encoder settings through using a software. You can choose the bit rate, the stream quality, because we're just presenting the computer with an uncompressed video feed that it can do whatever it wants to. But the flip side of that, and the things that you should definitely consider, is that with that becomes kind of greater strain on the computer. So you need to build a computer that has the kind of sufficient CPU power to handle that stream and be able to encode it for delivery.
Yeah, but these days the computer components are very easy to you can easily build a system. These days that technology is also improving, with all that's happening with us right now. So
definitely, I think for us, it's a case of we want to present two types of product lineup. We give the products with the UVC support, which means it's plug and play. So you can be up and running and working really quickly with the popular applications that you're used to working with. And then we give you slightly more control over the stream by going down a switcher and uncompressed capture device route. And then if you're comfortable and happy working within the software, setting your own parameters for encoding and things like that, then we want to provide you with the tools to do that. So we kind of sit products in two different sides to suit different people's needs.
Yeah, and the capture devices options basically covers whatever system you're using. So if you have a Windows that has PCIe, like a desktop PC, then that can be done. Or if you're using Thunderbolt system on Mac or in some Windows systems as well, that can be that can be used as well for those systems, right?
Definitely, yeah. We the range of products that we have drivers for both Mac and Windows-based systems, and it very much comes down to the preference of the individual. Obviously, if you're working on Mac, Thunderbolt might be more your preference. If you're in a desktop-based machine, go for PCIe for that. The thing that I would say is really crucial to remember is people will often say, "Oh, I've got a 4K camera, so I need to get a 4K capture device to push that out." The key thing to remember is, where are you actually going to be streaming this content to? Because if you stream into a platform, for example, like Facebook, which limits the stream quality to HD, there's no point in pushing out 4K from your camera into a 4K capture device, and then your computer's having to crunch everything down to get it down to HD. If it's sufficient, you can use a HD device and just take HD from the camera and then push that through the computer. So always look at where the final delivery is going to be, which platform you're going to use, and the formats that supports.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And as our team is switching between our shot and your shot, I noticed that you're doing some switching in there as well. So would you please tell us more about your setup that you have there?
Absolutely, yeah. So I thought it was really, really important to kind of showcase the products that we're talking about, and actually showcase it live as I'm doing it. So right at the beginning of this year, we actually decided that to kind of be able to cope with the facts that we weren't going to be out speaking with you guys in person and visiting yourselves, we wanted to build a studio which could equip us to still deliver the same content to you. So in here we've got 3 different cameras. We've obviously got the camera that I'm looking down right now. We've got an overhead camera just up here, which I can just cut to quickly. So this is ideal for doing things like product demonstrations, introducing products for the first time, and we can have that product shot that I can cut to really easily. And then I've got another camera just over my left shoulder, which is getting a slightly different angle there. And the fourth and final input is obviously my laptop that I've been cutting to show you some of the slides there. But yeah, the products that I'm using, and it's served me really well during this period, is the ATEM Mini Pro ISO. So the ATEM Mini Pro ISO is a 4-input HDMI mixer. So it's connected to our Pocket Cinema cameras, allowing us control over the Pocket Cinema cameras. I can actually drive the cinema cameras and trigger them to record, for example. And then I've got a HDMI output on the ATEM Mini Pro ISO, which is feeding to a monitor just behind the camera, so I can visually see the switching that's happening and reference that throughout the live feed. And then the final connection on there is a USB-C connection. So this is, I mentioned earlier in the piece that we've got a UVC webcam chip inside the ATEM Mini Pro. So this is actually feeding into Skype right now. So as I'm mixing, the USB output is being fed out of the ATEM Mini Pro ISO into Skype, and then we're able to have this conversation with you. The beauty of it being is that we're actually able to massively enhance the production value. I've done a number of meetings throughout the last few months where I end up cursing the built-in webcam on my computer because in the UK it gets dark a lot earlier now. So as soon as the sun goes down outside, all of a sudden you can see all of the noise in my webcam. The quality doesn't look very good. But having a setup like this where you've got professional quality cameras through a professional mixer and then feeding it into Skype, the production value is obviously much, much greater.
And yeah, you're getting a very good production value at the same time. One of the things that I've learned in live production is the more sources you have, the better it will be for you to tell the story. So you're doing that, you're telling a story. The more camera angles, the more sources that you have, it will be a lot helpful for you to be able to tell your story better. And again, production value, you get more sources coming in. At the same time, it looks pretty simple as well. So, at the back of it, you see just, the HDMI cables and then the USB-C cable connected to your system. So it's a pretty straightforward process.
Yeah, absolutely. The speed of setup and the ease of setup with a product like this is absolutely phenomenal. We've obviously set up the cameras on tripods, so there's a bit more time in terms of setting the studio itself up. But in terms of plugging in, it's just a case of running the HDMI cables from the cameras into the ATEM Mini Pro, and then plugging the output monitor into the output and the USB cable into the laptop. Again, the beauty of utilizing that UVC chip is I've opened up Skype, and without having to do anything, I've just gone into my video preferences and I can choose between built-in webcam and Blackmagic Design ATEM Mini Pro. I've not had to do anything else other than that. And within 5 minutes, I'm set up. So I sent you a Skype message this morning, Lawrence, at kind of just before we were supposed to come on air saying I'm good to go. I'd set that up in 5 minutes and I was ready to speak with you.
Actually, our reaction was probably your wait to our reaction was far longer than you setting up your system. But it's a very straightforward setup that can easily be done by everyone, I suppose.
Yeah, I think in terms of how you could replicate this, again, going back to the types of people that might be interested in this kind of solution, you've got lots of corporations now that, again, can't go out for face-to-face meetings, but they still want to have a high level of service and high quality delivery to their customers, because it isn't sufficient now. It's not adequate enough to have a kind of shooting out of a corner of a room with a really bad quality camera. If you want your business to kind of come across as a prestigious business and high quality service, you want to deliver content like this that looks much higher production value.
Yes, and as you said, it's everywhere. Your corporate, we're seeing it in education as well, in house of worship, and which brings me to my next question. So, who else, is using Blackmagic Design live streaming solutions?
Yeah, this year has been really exciting actually for me. So whilst I've been kind of at home, not been able to get out and kind of be in the world, I've been interacting with a huge number and variety of customers who want to utilize our web broadcasting products in a number of different ways. I collated together a few different examples which I thought would be really useful to show you. But I think first and foremost, we've touched on ourselves. We're our own best case study, as well as this delivery that I've done to you today. We've also done a number of DaVinci Resolve training sessions. So throughout the course of this year, we'd planned to go out and deliver training on the road. We'd built a huge truck, which was a DaVinci Resolve training classroom that we were going to drive around the entirety of Europe and the Middle East. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we had to shelve that. But what we did do, and we were able to do really quickly, was move that content online. And we utilized our own products to do that. So we were delivering the training through pocket cameras on the presenter, ATEM minis and web presenters to capture the feed from the laptop and the presenter, for example, and be able to switch between them and stream a very high quality image directly into people's homes. So they gave them the closest experience to actually being on the truck and being in the classroom with the trainers as we possibly could. I've interacted with some DJs as well. So there's a DJ that I used to listen to when I was a teenager, a guy called Darude, who's a Scandinavian DJ, and you may or may not remember Darude from back in the early noughties. But he's still DJing now, and normally he'd be DJing and have regular sets in the clubs around Scandinavia. Again, not able to do that, so he's taken his DJ sets online and pushed them through Twitch. And throughout the course of lockdown, he's done over 35 streams now and accumulated 250,000 views. And again, that's through ATEM Mini Pros, Blackmagic Pocket cameras on the production as well. Obviously, we can't talk about moving to online streaming without actually referencing the coronavirus as well. And one case study and a customer that I worked quite closely with, and it was a really kind of rewarding thing to work on, was St John's Ambulance, which is the UK ambulance service, and specifically the operation around the capital city in London. They were delivering daily briefings to their staff, to their ambulance drivers, so that they knew which hospitals in the capital were actually accepting new patients based on the increased levels of the virus in different areas and perhaps which hospitals were full. Now, rather than just doing that through a Microsoft Teams setup and having a single camera, they determined the best thing to do would be to increase their production quality, again, have a camera on the presenter, make it much more personable, and then be able to interject slides from the presentations to highlight potentially different feeds. And then a final one, which I thought was a really exciting one, was over in the US, and this was actually for the Emmys awards ceremony. So one of the most prestigious award ceremonies that exist now. You may or may not be able to see from the picture there, but there was 100 different nominees in the California region that were all working with an ATEM Mini Pro and a Blackmagic Pocket cinema camera. So what they were doing is they were all located at home, and they had pocket cinema camera on them, ATEM Mini Pro ISO, and then a light ring obviously onto them as well. And what that ensured was continuity across every single nominee. So as their feed was being narrowcast into the main broadcast for the Emmys, everyone looked exactly the same and had the identical setup. So rather than having one nominee in their bedroom in a dark room and another nominee in their kitchen with their kids running around behind them and stuff like that, it ensured that continuity. So that was 100 pieces of streaming equipment being broadcast into one of the biggest award ceremonies over in the US. So a kind of a massive kind of testament to how trusted that equipment is.
Yeah, I actually when I saw that story about that setup, I was like, whoa, okay, this is the new normal. Like, this is it. It's really happening. So it's a proud moment to see that Blackmagic was used in that setup. I mean, the pockets were used in that setup.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to see, the combination of Pocket Camera and ATEM Mini Pro now goes hand in hand. The fact that you've just got the HDMI input from the camera to the switcher, you've got the control going back to the camera, so you can physically drive them in a one-man operation. Seeing them on such a large award ceremony being used on such a prestigious event is really exciting for me, and just being able to kind of talk about it to you guys now and use that as my reference point, that's a really cool thing to be able to do.
Yeah, well, I know there's a lot of things to talk about this web broadcasting, and right now we encourage our viewers. So if you have any questions, just type them in. And for now, we have to say thank you to you, Darren. I know it's early out there. Thank you for joining us really today. And before you go, do you have any last message for our viewers?
First and foremost, it's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat with you today, Lawrence. As I say, it's been too long now, missing hanging out with you guys. I'm really looking forward to the next opportunity we can get back into the Middle East and spend some time with yourselves, with our customers over there. So yeah, I just want to say, kind of stay safe. Thank you very much for kind of continuing to work with us over the last few months, and really looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, we miss you here as well, Darren, as well as the whole BMD team. So, with that, we have to end the session. So we are switching over to our Q&A studio, but before that, we want to share with you this video. So again, thank you guys for staying in this session, and we'll see you in our next sessions.
Take care, guys.